My name is Nora Evans. I'm 28, and for most of my life, I was a ghost haunting the hallways of my own family home. I was the rough draft they kept in a drawer, while my sister, Claire, was the final, polished manuscript displayed for the world. Every attempt I made to earn my place felt like shouting into a hurricane, the words torn away before they could ever be heard. But I never stopped trying. I craved a single crumb of acceptance. The day before my sister's wedding in Maple Creek, Kansas, I was putting the final touches on a surprise I'd spent weeks creating. It wasn't just a box of decorations. It was a digital slideshow, a timeline of their love story, told through photos I had painstakingly restored and set to music. It was my heart, offered up on a silver platter. But a technical glitch, a corrupted file, made it unplayable just hours before the rehearsal dinner. It was a small, fixable error, but to my parents, who had always championed Claire and merely tolerated me, it was a catastrophe of my making. We were in their living room, a space that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and unspoken disappointment. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long, distorted shadows that made their faces seem alien. "You've managed to ruin this too, Nora," my mother Eleanor seethed, her voice a low hiss that carried the weight of years of resentment. My father, Richard, stood beside her, a silent, stony-faced judge. His nod was his verdict. "Your mother is right. Honestly, the greatest gift you could give your sister tomorrow is to just not be there. Just disappear from our lives for good." Those words didn't just slam into me. They passed right through me, leaving a hollow, freezing void where my heart used to be. My breath hitched, my chest tightening with a fury so potent it tasted like nettle. These were the people who taught me to walk, now telling me to get lost forever to avoid a minor inconvenience at their favorite child's party. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. A chilling calm settled over me. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, the metal cool against my clammy skin, and walked out. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, a deafening full stop on the sentence of my old life. The next day, I couldn't bear to attend. Instead, I found myself watching the ceremony through a friend's blurry, shaking live stream on my phone. Claire was radiant. My parents were beaming, raising champagne flutes in a toast, their smiles untroubled, as if my absence had been the final, perfect touch. But watching them, something inside me didn't break. It ignited, a cold, hard flame of determination. What if disappearing wasn't a punishment? What if it was my liberation? What dark, inconvenient truths would surface if I wasn't there to patch the cracks in their perfect facade? So I made their wish my reality. I packed 2 suitcases, sold my condo in a cash deal that closed in a week, and on the advice of a lawyer, I froze the joint family accounts I had dutifully paid into for years. I vanished from Maple Creek without a whisper. If you're wondering how a family built on image reacts when one of its pillars is removed, or what rot is exposed when the scapegoat leaves the pen, stay with me. This is the story of how I severed a toxic bond that was slowly strangling me. Curious where I landed? I'll give you a hint. It smells of salt and new beginnings. Growing up in Maple Creek, our home was a picture-perfect colonial on a tree-lined street, the kind of place where neighbors waved and assumed the lives within were as pristine as the manicured lawn. Behind closed doors, it was a different world. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Evans, ran a respected local financial firm. Eleanor was the face of the business, her charisma as sharp as her tailored suits. Richard was the quiet engine, the numbers man, who backed every decision, including the unspoken family hierarchy. Claire, 4 years my senior, was their star. She collected accolades, academic awards, trophies, like they were common seashells. Eleanor would polish and display them in the living room. "Claire just has that drive," she'd announce at dinner. "She's a natural." I tried to be a natural too. I poured myself into art, winning a regional prize when I was 10. Eleanor glanced at the ribbon and murmured, "That's a sweet little hobby, dear. But Claire's debate team just won the state championship. That's leadership." The constant comparisons were like a slow-acting poison, making every achievement feel hollow. By high school, I learned to make myself smaller, to fade into the background to avoid the sting of their casual dismissals. But the criticism only became more personal. "Nora, that blouse makes you look washed out. Don't you want to make a better impression?" I was a healthy weight, but her words warped my reflection in the mirror. When I mentioned an interest in graphic design, Richard chimed in, "Why not finance, like us? Your sister's already interning at a top firm." After graduating from a state college, while Claire attended an Ivy League, I took a design job in town. My small apartment became my only sanctuary, yet I was always on call. Eleanor's stress-related migraines began, and suddenly I was her designated driver for every appointment. "Your mom needs you, Nora," Richard would say during my lunch break. "Family first." I sacrificed promotions and the dream of moving to a bigger city, convincing myself this loyalty would one day be seen, be valued. But resentment was a vine, twisting around my heart. That corrupted file wasn't the reason they cast me out. It was just the excuse they'd been waiting for. Watching that live stream, I saw their joy, their relief. And in that moment, the hurt finally curdled into clarity. Vanishing wasn't revenge, it was survival. It was my turn to decide what I was worth. My sister's wedding was supposed to be my masterpiece of devotion. Nora Evans was marrying Mark Carter, a sleek investment banker she'd met in the city, and I deluded myself into believing that if I planned the perfect day, I might finally secure a permanent place in the family portrait. For months, it was my entire world. I negotiated with caterers late into the night, making sure her favorite braised short ribs were on the menu, but without the red wine reduction because Eleanor claimed it gave her headaches. I spent a whole weekend visiting flower farms to find the exact shade of blush peony Claire had once pointed out in a magazine. The guest list was a minefield of Eleanor's social ambitions. I tracked down addresses for over 200 people, cross-referencing RSVPs and dietary restrictions until my eyes blurred. I even designed the invitations myself, a delicate watercolor of the charming old barn we'd booked. Every decision was a silent plea. "See me, see what I can do." But they rarely did. When I showed Eleanor the final invitation suite, she held it at arm's length. "It's nice, Nora, but Claire would have chosen a classic engraving." Richard, without looking up from his stock market app, just added, "Don't drop the ball on this, honey. Your sister's day has to be perfect." I swallowed the familiar lump of inadequacy and pushed forward. Claire herself was a ghost in the planning process, too consumed by her corporate ladder to be bothered. She'd reply to my detailed emails with a curt, "Looks fine, do what you think is best." I was a wedding planner, a coordinator, and a therapist, all for a bride who barely seemed to notice. The closer we got, the sharper their critiques became. "Nora, your follow-up email to the photographer sounded desperate. I had to call her myself to smooth things over." I'd spent an hour crafting that email, but I just mumbled an apology, my stomach in knots. In a moment of blind hope, I spent nearly $1,000 from my own savings, money I'd earmarked for a professional development course, on a vintage sapphire bracelet for Claire, something old and something blue. I pictured her opening it, maybe even hugging me, a genuine moment of connection in front of everyone. I even bought a new dress for myself, a muted sage green that Eleanor couldn't possibly criticize. I practiced a serene smile in the mirror, determined to play the part of the devoted sister, even as I felt myself dissolving. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I was running on fumes and caffeine. I presented Eleanor and Richard with a leather-bound binder containing every contract, receipt, and timeline, all perfectly organized. Eleanor flipped through it, her lips thin, unimpressed. "This is adequate, I suppose," she said, closing it. "Let's just hope the execution is better than your slideshow idea." Their dismissal was the final crack in my crumbling facade. I went to bed that night with their words echoing in my head. Why was I trying to build a bridge to people who were actively dismantling it from the other side? I didn't know it then, but the corrupted file the next day would be the final blow. It wasn't about the slideshow. It was about me being the eternal, unfixable glitch in their perfect system. That final afternoon, the air in their living room was thick with tension. I was on my knees, laptop open, frantically trying to recover the slideshow file when Eleanor walked in. "What is the problem, Nora?" I looked up, my heart hammering. "The file for the slideshow, it's corrupted. I have a backup, but I need to go home to get my external hard drive. It'll take me an hour tops." She crossed her arms. "An hour? The rehearsal dinner starts in 2. You are always so disorganized. This is exactly what I was talking about." Claire and Mark were standing by the fireplace, observing. I shot a desperate look at my sister, a silent plea for her to intervene, to say, "It's okay, Mom, it's not a big deal." She just looked down at her perfectly manicured nails, utterly silent. Mark cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by a landscape painting on the wall. That's when Richard stepped forward, his face a mask of disappointment. "We've been patient with your creative pursuits, Nora, but this is an embarrassment." "It's not an embarrassment. It's a broken file. I can fix it," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "You know what, Nora?" Eleanor's voice dropped, becoming chillingly calm. "We've put up with your drama long enough. The best thing you could do for your sister's wedding, for this family, is to just disappear permanently." Richard nodded, his jaw tight. "It's for the best, Nora. You've never quite fit." The world went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a bomb. It wasn't about a file. It was about my entire existence being a mistake in their eyes. "Fine," I whispered, the word tasting of ash. "You'll get your gift." I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out the door, leaving the slam to say everything I couldn't. That night, my apartment felt like a stranger's home. I didn't sleep. Instead, a cold, methodical clarity took hold. The next day, after watching their smiling faces on the live stream, I made a call to a real estate agent known for quick, no-fuss sales. Then I contacted a lawyer my old college mentor had once recommended, a sharp woman named Evelyn Davies. Sitting in her mahogany-paneled office, I laid out the whole story, my voice even and detached, as if I were describing a character in a book. "I don't just want to leave," I told her, my hands steady in my lap. "I want to be erased. I want to build a new life where they can't find me." Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable. "This is a profound step, Nora. Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." She nodded, outlining the logistics. The joint family emergency account, primarily funded by me for Eleanor's various medical expenses, was the tricky part. "Freezing it is your right," she explained, "but they will see it as an act of war. We can set up a third-party trust. You will place the funds there, and a trustee will disperse payments for legitimate, documented expenses only. It protects both you and the money's intended purpose." Within 48 hours, I was a whirlwind of controlled demolition. I resigned from my job with a 2-sentence email. The apartment sold for less than it was worth, but the speed was priceless. Packing was a strange ritual of detachment. I sorted my life into 3 piles: donate, sell, and keep. The keep pile was laughably small. My laptop, some clothes, a sketchbook, and a small abstract painting I'd made in college, the one piece of my art I had ever truly loved. I chose Havenport, South Carolina, from a magazine article I'd read years ago about quiet coastal towns. It felt a world away from the landlocked plains of Kansas. The 3-day drive was a fugue state of highways, coffee, and silence. I kept my old phone tucked away in the glove compartment, a final, morbid curiosity. Eleanor texted once, "Where are you?" Claire sent a hollow, "Are you okay?" Richard's silence was the most damning confirmation of all. Havenport was a balm, a quiet town that smelled of salts and pluff mud. I rented a small, weathered cottage on the edge of a marsh, month to month. It had creaky floors and windows that swelled shut in the humidity, but it was a space that demanded nothing from me. I began to build a new identity, not as a disguise, but as an emergence. I started using my middle name, calling myself Ann Evans, and small jobs started trickling in. One morning, seeking coffee, I found a little place called the Salty Bean. The owner, a woman in her 50s with kind, knowing eyes named Clara, handed me my latte. "You're new here," she stated, more than asked. "This town is good for people looking for a clean page." Her words, offered without judgment, were a lifeline. A week later, the war Evelyn had predicted began. A post from Eleanor appeared in the Maple Creek Community Facebook group, a dramatic tale of a daughter who, in a fit of jealousy, vanished after ruining her sister's wedding and stealing the family's emergency funds. Richard commented, "We gave her everything and she betrayed our trust." The lies were so brazen, so complete, they almost seemed plausible. Claire, of course, was silent. The public shaming was a gut punch, but I refused to engage. I called Evelyn, who confirmed that Eleanor and Richard's attempts to withdraw thousands for wedding repairs and emotional distress had been denied by the trust for lack of documentation, while all of Eleanor's actual medical bills had been paid without issue. Their narrative was a lie, and the paper trail proved it. They weren't victims. They were performers, and I was done being their audience. 3 weeks into my new life, the past tried to drag me back. My old phone, which I'd started charging out of a grim sense of obligation, buzzed with a voicemail. It was Eleanor. "Nora, where are you? This isn't how a family is supposed to act." Her voice was laced with indignation, as if I was the one who had broken some sacred covenant. Then came a text from Richard, the first direct contact I'd had from him. "Your mother is in the hospital. Chest pains. You need to come home." A jolt of something cold and familiar, guilt, shot through me. It was their favorite weapon, honed to a razor's edge over decades. But this time, something was different. I didn't call back. I called Evelyn. She confirmed the trust was functioning as designed. It had paid for Eleanor's prescriptions and utilities, but her recent request for $10,000 for emergency cardiac care without a single doctor's note had been flagged and denied. The next day, a carefully worded email arrived from Dr. Evans, Eleanor's physician. "Nora, due to patient confidentiality, I can't discuss specifics. However, I can tell you that your mother's condition is stable and not life-threatening. The episode was more consistent with anxiety than a cardiac event. A panic attack. She was weaponizing her health to reel me in." I sat on my little porch overlooking the marsh, the humid air thick on my skin, and felt the last of the chains fall away. They didn't want me. They wanted my compliance. That night, I logged into the trust portal. Eleanor's recent requests were all there. Denied for lack of proof. $3,000 for landscaping repairs, $5,000 for unforeseen medical travel. The trust had, however, paid her electric bill and her cardiologist copay. They weren't destitute. They were desperate. I sent one final email to Dr. Evans. "Thank you for any update. The trust will continue to cover all legitimate documented expenses. Please ensure my mother receives the emotional and psychological support she clearly needs." It was short, factual, and severed the last emotional cord. Days bled into weeks. My freelance work as Ann Evans flourished. Clients praised my clean aesthetic and reliability. Clara invited me to a book club, and I found myself talking to women who knew nothing of the quiet, apologetic girl I used to be. I bought a set of canvases and started painting again, the vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of my former life. The guilt still visited sometimes, a phantom limb aching for what was lost, but I learned to see it for what it was, a ghost of a life that was no longer mine. Eleanor sent one last text. "Nora, we are your family. Come home." I deleted it. Richard remained silent. Claire's final message, "I miss you," went unanswered a week later. I wasn't being cruel. I was being free. Looking back isn't something I do often, but I now understand that true self-love sometimes requires an amputation. You have to be willing to cut away the parts of your life that are poisoning you even if they are the people who are supposed to love you most. Your worth is not determined by the space you occupy in someone else's life. It's determined by the life you build for yourself. I disappeared not to punish them, but to finally, truly find myself. And every single day, I do it all over again.